In a free society, we should be able to marshal our facts and marshal our statistics, and we should be able to make an argument based on that. And if people want to make those arguments, great. If not, then frankly, they shouldn't be part of the argument because they're no longer making an argument, they're making an emotional appeal. If anybody says to you that you're a racist, sexist, bigot, homophobe for making an argument based on facts, then they have exited the realm of the decent discussion, and you should not be having a conversation with them. It's a waste of time. So in the end, let's get back to at least trying to predicate our opinions on something called the truth. And people like to conflate their opinion with the truth. They say it's my truth, which is idiotic. There's no such thing as your truth. Right? There's just the truth and there's your opinion. If it is your truth, I can immediately assume it's bullshit.
The gaming landscape has changed since 20 years ago. There are some things that aren't going to come back, and I can deal with that. With the exception of independent games, the formula that's made games from the 90s and 2000s is gone. Why do I say this? Because it's very simple. Nothing about 5th and 6th gen games today would justify the steep game prices. Your typical PS2 game will have a limited story and limited replay value. You might have cutscenes and dialogue boxes, but there's nothing really there that suggests we need to go back to this era. That isn't to say those games are no longer fun, inspiring, or enjoyable. It's just that games today are capable of more. That's just a fact. It's easy to just say, let's remake an old PS2 game and call it a day, but imagine if you had to pay $70 for it, when it lacks a story and crucial storytelling elements that today's games have. Why I say this is simply because it's easy to blame developers of unfavorable decisions over politics. But for the activists that claim they've been playing video games and entertainment for almost their whole lives, it shouldn't be difficult for them to realize how similar Western games are nowadays to movies. Games back in the 90s and 2000s never had writing teams, they never had directors, cinematographers, or even actors. Today, that's all pretty much mandatory for every Western AAA game now. You even have A-list celebrities actually performing in these video games, not just voice acting, like Nicolas Cage, Danny Trejo, The Rock, Burt Reynolds, Liam Neeson, Chuck Norris, Keanu Reeves, Norman Reedus, the list goes on. What makes it sad is that a lot of these influencers are in their late 30s and early 40s, and their main focus is about how a female character looks in a particular game. To quote the guy in the most watched video on X at the moment, "Don't you have anything better to do?" They'll politicize common things that are actually normal among women, like short hair, ponytails, dreadlocks, square jaws, jackets, sneakers, jeans, and on and on. They'll complain about body types, literally any body type. Being thick is wrong, being skinny is wrong, being muscular is wrong. Basically anything that a developer does is wrong, and nothing these companies can do will satisfy them. They're basically turned into the political tribalists they claim they despise. They'll go out of their way to upload videos about trivial things like what Abby from The Last of Us 2 looks like, or how the women in Mortal Kombat dress. What you'll never hear them talk about are how women in movies look, or how women in movies dress. Pick a movie, pick any movie. Mission Impossible, your favorite superhero movie, anything at all. You have a 99.5% chance that there's no woman in the movie that's dolled up like a supermodel, unless that's her character. You have a 99.5% chance that there's no woman in the movie that's dressed up like a prostitute, unless that's her character. You'll never hear them comment on how Hayley Atwell looked in Mission Impossible: Dead Reckoning. How come she never strips or undresses throughout the whole film? The answer should be very obvious to people that's seen the movie. Because she has no reason to. Her character was created to look and act in certain ways. She has traits, she has interests, she has goals. Does she have sexual tendencies? No. Does the plot call for it? No. She doesn't look like a prostitute, because she's not a prostitute. Neither were Vanessa Kirby or Palm Clementif's characters. What does that tell you now about women in video games, and how these characters are backed by roughly the same number of people as characters you see in movies? While actors and actresses are meant to look attractive, you don't hire them to play supermodels and prostitutes for the most part. It's common sense, and in no ways is this political. You cast the right actor for the right role. That's how it is with video games. Story is the backbone of a movie, and as much as people don't like it, story's also the backbone of Western gaming nowadays. It's certainly not the only way games are made since there's still Japan, but story is what sets today's games apart from classic games the most. Story is what entices casual gamers to play games, and it's definitely how developers and publishers justify insane $70 prices. Without a focus on story, Tomb Raider would be dead. It makes more sense to charge $70 for a story than it is to charge $70 for adult content. I'm not somebody who's shy to point out when hot women are attractive. But if you want to please yourself with women, you don't have to spend $70. You can get adult imagery for free and the women are actually real. Hell, there are thousands of movies you can watch that are about intimacy, and they're not just cheap pornos. You can't say the same about video games. They don't make video games about intimacy. There's nothing stimulating about two artificial caricatures having fake sex. I don't doubt that developers have attempted it before. I know Baldur's Gate 3 exists, but it's a game where what happens in the game is up to the player, and the sex isn't necessary nor is it the main appeal of the game. It's there, but only if you want to see it. And of course, visual novels exist where the game is all about romance. But of course, these games don't have the budget like a AAA game, and even if the developers do profit off these games, they don't attract a broad audience. A company like EA would go under if they were to abandon $70 games and focus on games like this. But it's laughable how these influencers practically admit they're willing to spend $70 on fake women. They're so fixated on getting back at Rocksteady or Warner Brothers or Sony that they throw logic under the bus and they don't take advantage of the resources they have at their disposal. Because they don't care about actually solving the problems they complain about. This is what a cancel culture authoritarian says. Since when is it woke to have women that are fully clothed? Do you not look at the ESRB? Are we at the point where there has to be hell to pay if it doesn't say partial nudity or suggestive themes on the official ratings? What the hell is this? Are they not allowed to make the game they want? They're too stubborn to come to terms with how Western games can't make money today without storytelling. The West has been making movies nearly a century longer than Japan has been making video games. We have games like Bayonetta and Lollipop Chainsaw and BloodRayne, and what happened to them? They flopped. There wasn't enough demand from the market. The sales figures don't lie. You got to take into account that the video game market doesn't entirely consist of hornballs. If that were the case, these games would be selling like Pokemon. It's just like movies. You have Pamela Anderson that's nice on the eyes, but what happens when you try to push her sex appeal above marketing a story? You get Barbed Wire, which nobody remembers and couldn't even make $4 million bucks at the box office, about only $8 million when you factor in inflation. Sex appeal can work, but it has to be marketed right. Exhibit A, Pulp Fiction. That movie came out 2 years earlier and was one of the most watched movies of that year. Sure, Uma Thurman was the movie's poster girl, but the movie had a lot more to offer. It offered an interesting story, it offered action, it has A-list celebrities, it has characters like Mia that had layers and personality, it had rave reviews from prominent critics back in the day. It had something for everyone. It didn't just appeal to hornballs, and that's why it made money. That's what these melanin activists don't want apparently. They want less quality stories, and more over-budget mock pornos. They can try to shove Stellar Blade down people's throats and tout how it's gaming's last hope. Like, what the fuck are these people talking about? One game from Korea isn't going to make the whole industry decide to scrap cinematic storytelling and entire creative teams and filmmakers and actors. They're hallucinating about this woke crap 24/7. As I said before, they want to be CNN Jr. It's easy to say let's glam up Abby from The Last of Us to make her look like Kim Kardashian. These influencers don't know what they're asking for. These characters are meant to act a certain way. Making her look like a supermodel would ruin her character as well as what the game's about, a zombie apocalypse where only a few are alive. It's in the title, The Last of Us. Same with Reboot Lara Croft. Reboot Lara Croft was not meant to be the same character as classic Lara. And you can easily put a classic Lara skin on Lara in one of the newer games to see for yourself. This newer world and newer story wasn't meant for classic Lara. Now, does this mean that Western games are completely doing away with sexuality? Not at all. I know I've answered this question before in a previous video I made, but here I'll show you some examples of how sexuality is more selective with Western games today. The propagandists complain about Warner Brothers going woke, yet what's this? This is from DC Heroes and Villains, a match 3 mobile games that released last summer, an officially licensed DC/Warner Brothers game. There are a large number of female characters that dress more suggestively, like in the comics. The illustrator of this game actually follows me on X. His name is Philippe Ramsey. It doesn't seem like he's being influenced to design characters in the way that a Rocksteady is, for instance. Now, why is that? I can foresee that people will dismiss this as a mobile game, but that's the point, it's a mobile game. It doesn't have the budget that a Rocksteady game has, so there's not a big investment in the writing and storytelling. There's barely any writing and storytelling in this game. And that explains why this game doesn't have what Melanie activists consider a woke influence. Let's move on to another superhero game, one I've really enjoyed on the PS5 called Marvel's Midnight Suns. Now, this game does have a lot of story, and the women in the game are pretty much fully clothed, except when they're poolside, of course. Yes, all the heroes wear swimsuits, but there's a creative reason for it, so if you're thinking this is some Easter egg in the game, it isn't. In the main hub world, there's an unlockable spa. When a hero is injured, you put them in this spa to make them heal faster. And the pool is for cutscenes for building friendships. So heroes don't just wear swimsuits for no reason. It's for the pool and spa areas. Why would you wear your suit in the pool? So far, I've given 2 ways that Western developers properly use suggestive attire today, and I'm not even done yet. There's a game that came out last year called Crime Boss Rocky City. I could always mention GTA 6, but this game is fairly recent. You probably haven't heard of it or you've forgotten about it, but it features celebrities like Danny Trejo, Vanilla Ice, and Chuck Norris. There are prostitutes in the game. Kim Basinger as Casey is known for being a very provocative woman. Now, why hasn't the woke mind virus infected this game, I wonder? Because they actually have a plot that calls for it? Women that have lots of money and a big ego and want power and deal with crime on a consistent basis look like this in film. It doesn't make sense for Mary Jane to look like this. It doesn't make sense for a zombie apocalypse survivor to look like this. It makes sense for female crime bosses to look like this, because that's how their characters are written. And yeah, who remembers when people were calling Phoebe Waller-Bridge woke for creating a character like this? Make it make sense. So now we have Baldur's Gate 3, and I've already mentioned the game in this video, but it's yet another different scenario from the other 3 games in the sense that you create your own character and decide how the other characters in the game act. That's how this game sets itself apart from other fantasy games like The Witcher 3 and Diablo 4. They allow you to decide how the characters act and what sort of relationships you want and what kinds of characters you want to mate, like Karlach. That's left up to the player's imagination. I want my character to be well-mannered, I want my character to be an immortal hero, I want my character to sexually arouse others. Okay. You have the right to do that, because if it's possible in a movie, it should be possible in this game. So yeah. That's how Western game developers today decide to be more selective and smarter with suggestive themes. Because movie studios have been all this time. Suggestive themes are used for games that don't have a palpable story. They're used for characters that have the right personality. They're used for the right scenarios and ones that make sense, such as being at a pool, and of course, there are games where you dictate how the character is developed. It shouldn't be too much to ask for influencers to just understand the parallels between Western cinema and Western game design today. Because they have no idea what they're demanding today. How making them the changes they demand would affect games for the worse, considering how much these games cost to make in the first place, what kinds of people work on these games, and what audiences these games are marketed towards. And nothing I've said has been political at all. They can show us delusional columns from SJW game journalists all they want, that's not why these changes have happened with Western games. I don't want politically motivated games. But choosing between woke and quote anti-woke is like choosing between cancer and AIDS. I'm good with neither, thank you.